Hey there, I'm Carrie, and in this video I'm going to be talking about Shakespeare's Sonnet 130, also known as My Mistress' Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun. I'm going to read through the poem first, so if you just need to listen to it for class, that'll be right up front. Then I will go back and we'll break it down line by line, talk a little bit about theme, relevant history, and what some of this older English really means. If you're looking for more technical information about the sonnets, stuff like rhyme scheme and iambic pentameter, I've made a separate video about that and I will link that in the video notes. I've also got timestamps for this video in the notes, so definitely scroll down, click around, find exactly what it is you need. All right, let's get into Sonnet 130. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare. So there's a few things that I noticed about Sonnet 130. The first one is that the speaker or the poet is rejecting a lot of the poetic, dramatic cliches that are popular in poems of this day and age, you know, the Elizabethan England. All these very over-the-top comparisons that are used to describe women, like, you know, she has the voice of an angel, you know, she has eyes like the sun, you know, that kind of thing. He's rejecting that. He's pushing that away, saying these cliches are just ridiculous, and I'm not going to use it. I'm going to embrace reality here. This woman is fully human. The ironic bit of that is that all these poetic conventions, all of these ridiculous, over-the-top cliches that the poets were using at this time, a lot of that came from Shakespeare himself. There's some very specific references to one of Shakespeare's most famous plays. I will point that out as we go, but if Shakespeare's had enough of it, he has no one to blame but himself at this point. The second thing that I notice here is the poet is rejecting the image of the ideal female, his contemporary image. It's very different from what we would think of as the idealized woman right now. So he is rejecting the physical ideal that was popular in his day. This is something that we still do now. We still have conversations about what is the physical ideal for a woman. Also, who can achieve that and what happens to the women that do not fit into that category. That is still something that we're talking about today. So that makes this poem very relevant in some ways. Now let's talk about what would have been the physical ideal for a woman of Shakespeare's day. Now, the sonnets, Shakespeare's collection of sonnets, were published in the first couple of years of King James I's reign. But the first half of Shakespeare's career, Queen Elizabeth I was on the throne, and she was a fashion icon. Whatever Elizabeth wore, all of the women of the court, all the wealthy aristocratic women of the day would have flocked to those fashions. So let's talk about Elizabeth I's personal style. Now remember, she was a female head of state in a time when that was very, very, very rare. Not everyone loved Elizabeth I. She had a lot of people that did not like a woman in charge of the country. She had a lot of enemies, a lot of people who did not wish her well. So she needed to project an image of absolute authority. She needed to be unquestionable. She could not be just any other aristocratic woman. She used her physical look, her wardrobe, her personal style as a tool to help her project authority, to project this awe-inspiring presence whenever she entered a room. Now, Elizabeth had light-colored hair, kind of a strawberry blonde, light red hair. She used hair pieces later in life, not only to maintain the color, but also to be sure that she could keep doing, very elaborate, interesting hairstyles. Also, her makeup is still famous today. She wore this very thick, stark white makeup on her face and on her neck. And a lot of people think she started doing this because she had had smallpox as an adult, so she had facial scars and she wanted to cover that. So she wore this very stark white makeup that gave her a very striking profile, almost like a statue or like a painting. Of course, when you had this thick white makeup on, none of your natural coloring is going to come through. So then she had to paint on cheek color, paint on lip color. So she did have very, very dramatic coloring in that respect. Her dresses were also a part of it. She wore very fancy, heavy dresses that exaggerated her shape. And the dresses would have these fabric extensions, both in the collar and off the back of the dress, that were made of lace. They kind of looked like angel's wings, and it all contributed to this very dramatic, awe-inspiring kind of otherworldly look when you were looking at Queen Elizabeth I. And as I mentioned, wealthy women of the day, women of style and fashion would have flocked to this. People still do this now. Whenever the Duchess of Cambridge or the Duchess of Sussex steps out in public, whenever there's a new photo, people say like, oh my goodness, who designed her dress? Where did those shoes come from? What brand is that handbag? And the designers will sell out within hours because people want to be wearing what the duchesses are wearing. You want to match this woman of influence and style. And the women of Elizabeth's court were no different. So this is the image that Shakespeare is talking about. This is the idealized female, this queenly profile that Elizabeth had popularized. And the poet, the speaker, is rejecting this very stylized, dramatic, rich and ornate image of a woman. I'll remind you, of course, that this sonnet was published in the first year of King James's reign. I'm not sure that Shakespeare would have had the guts to publish this while Queen Elizabeth was still running things. This is part of a group of sonnets called the Dark Lady sonnets. So they are either talking about or addressed to a character called the Dark Lady. That description, Dark Lady, that could be referring to her looks. As you've already seen in here, this is probably a dark-haired, dark-eyed woman. It could also be referring to the fact that she is not the typical heroine of a Shakespearean poem or a Shakespearean play. She's probably a little bit older. She's probably not a wealthy aristocrat, not a noble woman. She also may not be the very, young, naive, sheltered, inexperienced woman that we see playing the lead in a lot of Shakespeare's plays. All right, so let's go back, get back into the text and go line by line, talk about what some of this means. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Okay, so remember, Dark Lady sonnet, and we get that right in the first couple of words. The word mistress does imply a sexual relationship with a woman that he isn't married with, so this is not completely inexperienced, sheltered young woman. If it was, he probably would have used the word lady or my love or something like that. So my mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. When a poet said that a woman's eyes were like the sun, they probably meant that she had a very light eye color, like very light blue eyes. So he's saying she does not have that. She probably has dark eyes, has brown eyes, but also this is a reference to one of the most famous scenes from Shakespeare. In Romeo and Juliet, the very famous balcony scene opens with what from Romeo? What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east. Juliet is the sun. So again, if the speaker is sick of these ridiculous comparisons, no one but himself to blame. Coral is far more red than her lips red. So there's a couple things here. First of all, he's saying, don't say her lips are more red than coral. They're not. That's not realistic. She has a normal lip color. This might also be implying that she doesn't wear makeup. So she does not have these painted on very, very red lips. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. So dun means like kind of a beigey, like a dull gray-brown color, which seems kind of rude to describe someone's skin that way. Again, he might be reflecting on the fact that she is not wearing makeup. She doesn't have that thick, stark white makeup that gives her that statuesque look. But that could mean a couple of other things too. It could be a reflection on her ethnicity. Perhaps this is not a woman of English descent. This could be a woman of Mediterranean descent or a woman of African descent, and so she naturally has a darker complexion. This might also be a reflection on her social class. Aristocratic women, even apart from the very stark white makeup, would have been expected to have very pale skin. It was a signal that they did not have to go outside. They were not outside working, tending a garden, washing clothes, anything like that. They had servants to do that for them. They could always be indoors, and that was why they had this very, very pale skin. Since he's saying that she has darker skin, that could be a signal that this is a working class woman. She has to be outside buying food. She has to be outside hauling water from the well, and so she may have a tan. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. So again, when a poet said she's like the sun, that was usually a reference to her eye color, also her hair color. Blonde hair, very light colored hair would have been the fashion, and wigs and hair pieces and hair bleaching were all a thing back in the day to achieve that look. So he's saying she's not a blonde. She doesn't have that favorite hair color. She has black hair, but he's also saying she does not wear the wigs. She does not go through the hair dyeing procedure. She just has her natural hair color, and it's dark. I have seen roses damasked red and white. So damask is a fabric. It's a very heavy patterned fabric that people would use for upholstery. They would use it for decorating. So if you say something is damasked, it means it's decorated. So he says, I've seen roses damasked red and white. That means the roses have been decorated red and white. They have red and white petals. But no such roses see I in her cheeks. The literal, her cheeks do not look like roses. They are not redder than roses, but also she's not wearing makeup. So she does not have the stark white and the dark red. She has just natural coloring. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. So reeks means something that stinks. It is not a compliment. So he's being literal here. He's saying her breath does not smell like roses. It doesn't smell like orange blossoms. It smells like a human's breath. This could also be another implication that this is a working class woman. She can't afford to buy herbs or spices that she could chew on to freshen her breath. So she just smells like a normal human being. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. So that is a reference to, again, some of these weird cliche things saying oh, she has a voice like a flute, a voice like a harp, a voice more beautiful than any chamber musicians, that kind of thing. So he says, no, she doesn't have a voice more beautiful than music. She doesn't have a voice like a harp, but there's also a compliment in there. He says, I love to hear her speak. I would rather talk to her. I'd rather have a conversation with her and hear what she thinks than sit and listen to an amazing orchestra. I grant I never saw a goddess go. Grant in this context means admit or to allow something. So you're saying I admit it. She's not a goddess. She's a mere mortal like the rest of us. When he brings the goddess into it, again, Shakespeare could be referencing his own work. The goddess of love and beauty, Venus, is frequently mentioned in Shakespeare's work. Her Greek name was Aphrodite, so she's also known as Aphrodite. Some of the other Roman goddesses like Minerva and Diana, their Greek names are Athena and Artemis, they also show up in Shakespeare's work. So he is kind of rejecting some of his own references here. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. She's down here with the mere mortal. She is fully human. He also may be dragging Romeo and Juliet a little bit more here, that famous balcony scene again. Another one of Romeo's lines is, speak, bright angel. He calls Juliet the bright angel, compares her to a winged messenger of heaven. So he's talking about, a heavenly being flying around up there in the sky. And in this one, the poet's saying nah, she's down here. She walks on the ground. I've seen it. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare. When he says by heaven, he's swearing. That's like taking an oath. I'm telling you the absolute truth. I think my love the lady. I think my love as rare as any she, belied. If you belie something, that means you give a false impression of it. You tell a lie about it. So he's saying like, you know, other men or other poets make false comparisons. They give people a false idea of what this woman looks like or sounds like or acts like. And I don't want to do that. I still think she's rare and special and unique, even though I'm not making these over the top comparisons about her. I see her just as she is, you know, fully human. And I think she's rare and precious and beautiful. All right, that's about all I've got on Sonnet 130. I hope you found some of that helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe, turn on notifications so you know when the next story or poem becomes available. If you had a different poem in mind or a particular author that you're interested in, drop that in the comments and I will see what I can do. Best of luck to you, and I'll see you in the next chapter.